The western sun burned dry and relentless over the land that stretched toward the horizon like a never-ending golden sea. Dust swirled across the lonely ranch road, kicking into the air behind a rusted old truck moving steady and deliberate, just like the man who drove it. His name was Adam Cole, a quiet rancher from the outskirts of Red Valley, population 3,200. Most people knew him for two things: his cattle ranch and the river that cut through the far edge of his land. What most people didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was that he was also the county water commissioner, a position he held discreetly, quietly, responsibly. In a land where water was worth more than gold, that title carried immense power, but Adam never abused it. He believed land was a gift, one that should be worked, cared for, and preserved, not exploited. His family had been ranchers for 4 generations, and his water rights were older than Red Valley itself. A thin legal document, filed in dusty county records over 100 years ago, gave the Cole family unrestricted claim to a quarter-mile of river and the right to divert as needed for agriculture. But everything changed the day the Canyon Ridge Homeowners Association moved into Red Valley. They came disguised as Progress. They brought polished trucks, glossy real estate brochures, and drone footage of their planned dream community. They bought out abandoned properties and convinced old landowners to sell. Wealthy outsiders moved in, building sprawling luxury ranch-style homes next to genuine working ranches, calling themselves country folk while never setting foot in mud. At first, Adam ignored them. He kept his head down, minding his cattle, repairing fences, and irrigating his fields the way he always had. The Canyon Ridge people did not like that. In their eyes, his land was ugly, old-fashioned, unregulated. They considered his ranch an eyesore next to their pristine subdivision, with its white fences and decorative barn lights that had never seen a horse. But they didn't bother him until they found out about the river. The HOA president, a man named Michael Sterling, arrived in Red Valley wearing a clean smile and a perfect handshake. He was everything Adam despised about corporate men, well-groomed lies wrapped in tailored suits. Michael was a developer from the city who had run out of land to exploit. When he saw Red Valley, he didn't see history, he saw money. His vision was to turn the entire area into a private resort community. There was just one problem: water. The new homes required water rights, clean water, stable supply, river access. But Red Valley's county well infrastructure was barely holding together, and the desert was drying more each year. Without new water sources, Canyon Ridge would die before it grew. Michael knew this, and his eyes landed on the Cole Ranch. Unlike anyone else in the county, Adam had a direct, legal water right to the river, and Michael wanted it. Rumors started slowly, whispered in real estate meetings and HOA discussions. Claims that Adam was hoarding water, that his irrigation system was outdated, that his ranch was wasteful. New Canyon Ridge residents, desperate to keep their lawns alive and their pools filled, began complaining. They harassed the county about water scarcity, pointed fingers toward Adam's ranch, and filed complaints about improper water diversion. Adam stayed silent. The pressure grew quietly at first: anonymous letters, unwanted visits, cars that stopped outside his gate to take photos. Canyon Ridge men with clipboards showed up asking questions they weren't authorized to ask. Then came the surveyors, stepping across his boundary line, pretending they were allowed to map the river. Adam removed them politely at first, then firmly. But eventually, they stopped asking. Eventually, they stopped pretending. Then the real attack began. One morning, Adam found a heavy stack of legal documents nailed to the front gate of his ranch. A lawsuit filed by the Canyon Ridge HOA accusing him of illegally diverting water and destabilizing the water table for the entire community. The lawsuit demanded the county temporarily transfer his river rights to HOA control until regulation and review were completed. They thought he would panic. They thought he would hire an expensive attorney, waste time in hearings, and drown in legal procedures until he gave up his water rights just to end the fight. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They didn't know he was the one who approved every legal water transfer in the county. They didn't know he wrote half of those water regulations himself. They didn't know that crossing him was crossing a man who studied water law the way soldiers study war. He knew every trap in the regulations. Every loophole. Every dirty trick. Adam didn't speak publicly. He didn't argue. He didn't meet with reporters or lawyers. He didn't tell anyone what was coming. Because Adam knew one thing: people like Michael Sterling always underestimated quiet men. He hosed down his porch, repaired a tractor, fed his cattle, and studied every legal form they sent. Then he went into his office, pulled out a thick leather-bound folder, and laid it on the table. In it, sealed, stamped, binding, was his family's original water deed, backed by the state Supreme Court. This was not just a land dispute. This was war. And Adam Cole did not lose wars. Outside, across the river, survey markers began appearing again. Strangers trespassed deeper onto his land. Someone cut the wire fence near the water line. Someone tried blocking his irrigation pipe. A message had been sent. So he sent one back. He rewired his fence. He filed a counterclaim with the court. He documented every trespass, every violation, every illegal pipeline they installed under cover of night. And he waited. He planned. He prepared to expose every corrupt move the HOA made. Because he knew what they didn't: water rights don't belong to the loudest voice. They belong to the one who knows how to fight for them. And Adam was just getting started. The river wasn't just water. It was survival. And no man was going to take survival from him. Not the HOA. Not Canyon Ridge. Not Michael Sterling. The river was his. And he would defend it until his last breath if he had to. The first lawsuit was only the opening move. Like a dust storm slowly crawling over the desert, the attack from Canyon Ridge grew thicker, darker, and harder to ignore. Still, Adam Cole remained silent. He knew better than to strike too early. A real fight didn't start with rage, it began with positioning. Weeks passed, and the HOA escalated. They sent more enforcers, well-dressed men pretending to be officials, clipboard-carrying frauds who spoke with entitlement rather than authority. They showed up at the edge of his property, writing down measurements they didn't understand. They filmed his irrigation system, hoping to gather evidence for their claims of water misuse. They even brought contractors to inspect the riverbank for environmental concerns. Adam knew what they were doing. They were building a narrative, piece by piece, meant to turn the county against him. But while they studied him, he was studying them. Every camera pointed at his ranch had a drone pointed back at them. Every survey mark they placed on his land was photographed and logged. Every contractor who touched his soil found his name permanently recorded. He didn't confront them. He didn't warn them. He watched and gathered ammunition. Soon after, the second wave arrived. The county clerk's office called him to report a flood of complaints: anonymous environmental violations, illegal damming, dangerous livestock practices, even false claims that he was contaminating the river. The HOA had taken their fight into the legal shadows. They were trying to bury him in paperwork. If they succeeded, a judge could order his river temporarily seized until investigations were complete. The move was sneaky, just clever enough to work on anyone who didn't understand water law. But Adam saw through it clearly. Canyon Ridge believed that complaints and legal force would pressure him into settlement. They thought they were suffocating him. But they had made a critical mistake. They assumed Adam Cole was just a rancher. Their arrogance blinded them to the truth. He was the county water commissioner, and everything they were doing, every trespass, every illegal pipeline, every tampered survey, was a federal water crime. The day he received the 10th complaint notice, Adam went into town and walked into the courthouse with a quiet, measured calm. He wore no hat, no work gloves, no ranch clothes, only a black button shirt and a mind sharpened like a blade. He didn't ask for a hearing. He didn't speak to a judge. Instead, he walked past the main offices and entered a locked room that very few people in the county even knew existed: the Water Rights Archive. Inside that room were 100 years of legal land and river records. And Adam knew exactly what he was looking for. He found the Canyon Ridge purchase records. He found their water usage applications, the ones that had been denied. He found the deed lines they covered up with landscaping. He found proof of every lie they had filed. And worst of all for them, he found forged survey maps. Someone inside Canyon Ridge had been altering legal hydrology documents to manipulate land boundaries. Forgery. Fraud. Federal crime. Adam copied everything. Recorded every violation. He built a case, not a complaint, but a war file. He left the courthouse without a word. That night, he knew the HOA would move again. They always escalated when they sensed pushback. So, he drove down to the river, stood under the stars, and listened. Water slipped through the channel in gentle rhythm. Coyotes yipped in the distance. Beyond the trees, he saw headlights creeping along the opposite bank. He raised his binoculars. A team of men was working under floodlights, hauling equipment out of truck beds. Steel pipes. Pumps. Plastic tank reserves. Concrete anchors. They were attempting to reroute the river. They weren't hiding it anymore. They were stealing it in the open. This wasn't just some dispute over irrigation anymore. This was a planned river extraction, a water theft operation. The HOA, Michael Sterling, planned to divert the river before any court hearing could stop them. They wanted the river flowing into Canyon Ridge before the law could catch them. Once that water pipeline touched an HOA property line, they could stall it in legal court for years. Adam knew why they moved tonight. They thought he was just a rancher. They thought he didn't know the river was already legally protected. They didn't know he had installed a covert water flow tracking system under the Commission's authority. Every illegal gallon they were about to pump would show up in state records as theft. He photographed everything. Then he walked back inside and made a call, not to local police, who would drag their feet, not to the county board, who were already bought by Canyon Ridge money, but to someone far above them all. The Bureau of Water Integrity. They didn't arrive immediately. Water crimes were slow to prosecute. But the call was on record now, and that meant one thing: if Adam could prove theft before the court hearing, Canyon Ridge would lose everything. But the HOA was still pushing hard. The very next morning, a new notice hit his gate: $150,000 in HOA fines for illegal river development. The HOA was now claiming his river belonged to Canyon Ridge jurisdiction. They even stapled a fake jurisdiction notice to his gate, claiming his land had been annexed without his consent. It was absurd. It was illegal. It was desperate. But it was also dangerous. Adam was faced with two choices: fight them publicly or destroy them quietly. The town was already turning against him. Canyon Ridge residents had begun gathering signatures to stop Adam's water abuse, driven by lies and misinformation. His cattle buyers were canceling contracts. Neighbors were being pressured not to work with him. Canyon Ridge wanted to isolate him, starve him financially before the court date. But they still didn't understand him. A weaker man would have folded. A frightened man would have begged for settlement. But Adam wasn't either of those things. Because the fight wasn't about cattle anymore. It wasn't about land. It wasn't even about water rights. This was about principle. And he knew one thing no one else knew yet. He had a trump card, one hidden legal document that could end this war instantly. But it wasn't time yet. He needed Canyon Ridge to commit their final mistake. They had already trespassed. Already tampered with county maps. Already forged signatures. Already begun illegal water diversion. Now he needed them to cross one more line. And the best way to do that was to make them believe they were winning. So Adam stepped back. Made no move. Filed no objection. He let them think he was drowning, financially, legally, morally. And they took the bait. Because men like Michael Sterling always wanted everything. And when they see something they don't own yet, they can't help themselves. They come to take it. Even if it means stepping into a trap. Because that river wasn't just water. It was bait. And Michael Sterling was about to swallow the hook. The quiet war had begun. And Adam Cole had just seized control of the battlefield. The sun rose heavy and red over the dry hills of Red Valley, casting a copper sheen over the silent land. A distant windmill creaked, and cattle grazed slowly on brittle grass. Everything seemed still. Calm. Unchanged. But beneath that peaceful surface, the war for the river was accelerating. To Canyon Ridge, silence meant victory. Their lawyers believed they had cornered Adam Cole. Their engineers were finishing the underground water pipeline to reroute the river. Their environmental task force had begun patrolling his riverbank daily, taking photos and reporting made-up violations. Canyon Ridge believed they had broken him. They believed fear had forced him into retreat. But Adam hadn't retreated. He had simply gone quiet, just long enough for them to lower their guard. Because the best time to strike is when your enemy thinks he's already won. The illegal pipeline had taken shape quickly. They had laid nearly half a mile of industrial-grade PVC water pipe just beneath the riverbank, disguised under freshly planted sagebrush. They had placed small pump stations along the way, masked as generator boxes. To anyone who didn't understand river systems, the operation would have looked harmless. But Adam knew better. He didn't just see equipment, he saw intent. This wasn't an experiment. This wasn't a trial system. This was permanent water seizure. The pipeline didn't stop at Canyon Ridge property. It extended past it, straight toward a fenced-off section of their land-marked Future Development Phase 2. He knew what that meant. Canyon Ridge wasn't stopping at 200 homes. They were building a reservoir. An illegal man-made lake, one they could profit from forever. They weren't just stealing his river, they were going to bottle it, sell it, and bury the truth beneath real estate brochures and resort marketing. But they had a problem. They had underestimated the river. Adam Cole's great-grandfather had once said that a man who doesn't understand water shouldn't be allowed near it. Water remembers the land it belongs to. It moves patiently. It always returns. And Adam had learned that lesson well. Canyon Ridge thought they could bury a river and redirect it like a mining tunnel. But water always spoke. In pressure. In flow. In resistance. And when you try to control what belongs to nature, nature pushes back. Over the next week, Adam began a counter-operation, not one of lawyers or courts, but of strategy and precision. He moved only at night, unseen under the cover of shadows and willow trees. Every step he took was measured. Every tool he used left no trace. He followed the underground pipeline on foot, marking each illegal joint and connection. He never cut anything yet. Never tampered. He only memorized. Because a single cut would alert them. A real strike had to be clean. Permanent. Silent. At the same time, he began reinforcing his legal position. Every day he filed a new small claim, each one directly tied to water law violations. He didn't file them in civil court. He filed them at state level, ensuring they couldn't simply be bought off or thrown out by local judges. He submitted geological surveys proving the river was a protected agricultural channel. He filed trespassing charges for each unauthorized land intrusion. He submitted evidence of altered hydrology maps along with requests for criminal forgery investigations. He didn't fight the HOA in one battle. He opened 13 separate legal fronts against them. They wanted to bury him in paperwork? Fine. He buried them in something much heavier, legal accountability. But Michael Sterling didn't panic. Canyon Ridge had lawyers. Canyon Ridge had influence. Canyon Ridge had money. And men like Michael believed money always won. So Michael decided to escalate again. The third wave of attack didn't come with letters or papers. It came with boots. One afternoon, Adam returned from town to find 3 black SUVs parked outside his ranch gate. Men in tactical vests stood beside them. These were not county officers. These were private security, contracted muscle. The message was clear: back off. They didn't enter his property. They didn't threaten him verbally. But their presence alone spoke volumes. They were intimidation wrapped in legal technicality. Let us take the river, or we'll take everything. Behind them, Canyon Ridge installed new boundary fencing along the riverbank. They posted signs that read, Canyon Ridge HOA, Authorized Water Access Zone. They were attempting to visually claim land they did not own. Anyone who saw those signs would assume the river was HOA property. This was no longer war, it was invasion. But Adam didn't remove the signs. He didn't challenge the guards. He didn't fight them head-on. Instead, he outflanked them. 3 nights later, he returned to the river. The moon hung low, the only witness as he waded silently through cold water. He reached the underground pipeline and knelt beside one of the large junction pits. He unscrewed the metal plate. A stolen master plan map he had memorized showed him exactly where he was. He lowered his headlamp beam inside and inspected the joint. Yes, there it was, just as he expected. The HOA pipeline was illegally tapping into a secondary water vein and underground river channel. They weren't just stealing from him, they were draining the natural riverbed. That would cause river collapse, land erosion, and ecological destruction. That was the line. That was the crime he needed them to commit. Now he could destroy them. But he didn't cut the pipe yet. Not here. Instead, he screwed the plate back on tight and continued deeper into the pipeline system, tracking their hidden route. Miles in, where the pipeline crossed beneath abandoned grazing land, he found the perfect point, the control hub. A steel hatch in the dirt, leading to a buried pump station. He opened it. The humming engines inside shook the ground faintly. Massive suction pressure pulled water through the system like a dying heartbeat. This was the artery. If this died, the entire system died with it. Adam reached into his pack and pulled out a small metal case. Inside were 2 things, a hardened steel pipe vise and a forged state seizure tag. A water commissioner's silent authority. He clamped the steel pipeline with the vise. One twist and 480 gallons per minute would hit an unmovable wall. The pipeline would implode. Buried tanks would rupture. Like eggshells. The water would force itself home, back to the river. And when Canyon Ridge came looking for answers, all they would find legally was a state seizure tag marking their entire operation as under official water investigation. No lawsuit. No court argument. Immediate state shutdown. He placed the metal vise against the pipe. He locked it into position. He braced himself. Then he stopped. Because he heard something. A human voice. A flashlight beam. Someone else was here. He turned off his headlamp. The security team had begun patrolling at night now. They were closing in, searching for him. Adam stepped back into the darkness. He had been seconds away from winning the war. But instead of forcing victory, he withdrew because great victories aren't rushed. Especially when the enemy is desperate. Especially when killing the pipeline wasn't enough. He didn't just want to stop them. He wanted to end them. Completely. And to do that, he had to make sure everyone saw exactly what Canyon Ridge had done. The theft. The fraud. The corruption. The land destruction. All of it. He would let them finish the pipeline. And when they flipped the final switch, when they celebrated their theft of his river, he would expose them in front of the entire county. He would let them think they'd won. Because the higher men like Michael Sterling climbed, the harder they fell. The trap was nearly ready. And soon, the river would choose its own justice. The pipeline neared completion under a false sense of security engineered by arrogance. Canyon Ridge believed they had forced Adam Cole into submission. They believed their intimidation, lawsuits, private security, and financial pressure had broken him. Every night, their workers continued finishing the pipeline in secret, and every night, Adam watched from the shadows. He knew this land better than they ever would. The soil, the river curves, the hidden rock beds, even the way the water pressure surged after the mountain snowmelt. This terrain had memory. His father had taught him to listen to the land. His grandfather had taught him how to move through it unnoticed. Canyon Ridge thought they were building in secret, but the earth itself betrayed them. Adam followed the pipeline to its endpoint, hidden behind a false construction site inside Canyon Ridge territory. There he found what he expected: a command station, built underground and accessed through a camouflaged steel lid beneath a fake maintenance shed. It was corporate clean. Smooth servers. Digital monitors. Automatic pressure regulators. 3 high-efficiency industrial pumps. This was no rogue irrigation system. This was a water extraction facility. At full power, it could drain a river in less than a year. It didn't matter that this violated state water law. It didn't matter that it infringed on federally protected agricultural channels. It didn't matter that this would starve every ranch and farm downstream. None of that mattered to men like Michael Sterling. Profit had replaced honor. Water had become currency. And greed had become law. But water law was Adam Cole's territory. And thieves were about to drown in it. 2 days later, the pressure spiked. Every sensor on Adam's irrigation system began flashing warnings. Overnight, water flow had dropped by 42%. It was no accident. Canyon Ridge had begun siphoning late at night, small, slow draws designed to test the system before a full takeover. So Adam adjusted. He didn't panic. He didn't confront. He quietly rerouted his own irrigation to emergency wells and closed his main river valve. Then he waited. That small pause created the illusion of surrender, exactly what he wanted Canyon Ridge to believe. The very next night, they increased the flow rate again, unaware that the pressure change triggered automatic documentation through the state water monitoring network under Adam's authority. In 48 hours, Adam had collected enough data to prove intentional river theft in court. But he didn't take it to court yet. Because the law didn't just punish illegal diversion, it punished everyone involved. And he wanted every guilty hand exposed. The board. The engineers. The surveyors. The lawyers. Michael himself. He wanted them caught together. No escape. No scapegoats. No settlements. He wanted a complete collapse. The county hearing had been scheduled by Canyon Ridge lawyers as a show of dominance. They believed they would enter the courthouse flanked by attorneys and create a legal storm so overwhelming that Adam would be forced to negotiate. They expected resistance. Instead, they were met with silence. Adam didn't step forward at the opening statement. He made no argument. He presented no defense. Canyon Ridge attorneys boasted confidently that Adam had violated water ordinances and illegally controlled river access. They waved forged maps, fabricated photos, and manipulated evidence in front of local officials. And still, Adam said nothing. Because he knew what they didn't. This wasn't the final hearing. This was bait. The harassment intensified. Signs were vandalized. He received threats disguised as warnings. His cattle water troughs were tampered with. Someone even tried to lock his main irrigation gate shut with welding steel. The HOA wanted to force a confrontation. But they didn't understand that patience can destroy a man faster than force. While they raged, Adam prepared. He moved deeper into strategy, assembling everything he needed for the final strike. He had thousands of timed photos showing construction on his land. He had GPS logs matching trespass incidents to Canyon Ridge contractors. He had county survey records showing altered maps. He had digital water flow reports confirming illegal siphoning. He had environmental assessments proving river disruption. He had excavation reports showing buried illegal pipeline. And most importantly, he had witnesses. Evidence did not bring down corrupt men. Exposure did. So Adam waited for the moment they would reveal themselves before the whole town. And it came, just as he knew it would. The Canyon Ridge HOA announced a groundbreaking ceremony for their new water sustainability project and invited the entire county to witness it. They called it Hydra Ridge Reservoir, a project designed to support Red Valley's future generation. It was nothing less than a land theft celebration. Michael Sterling claimed the project was approved by state law. He claimed environmental compliance. He even claimed water rights were granted exclusively to Canyon Ridge HOA under a Protective Conservation Expansion Clause. Every word he spoke was a lie. And he was about to speak those lies on camera, before the county, the press, and state officials. Exactly as Adam planned. The morning of the event came. Canyon Ridge stood decorated in banners and flags. Wealthy residents dressed in their finest Western costumes, leather boots without a speck of mud, polished belt buckles they didn't earn. They believed they were about to witness history. The sheriff stood nearby, under quiet HOA influence. County supervisors were present. Contractors. Investment partners. Buyers. A false empire had gathered to bless its future. And Adam was already there watching. Hidden beyond the crowd. Waiting for one switch to be flipped. At the center of the stage stood a bright red lever, decorative, symbolic, theatrical. Michael Sterling would pull it to activate their reservoir pump system. Cameras would flash. Cheers would rise. The crowd would erupt. What they didn't know was that pulling that switch wouldn't just activate a pump. It would activate something much bigger. Because deep underground, beneath their feet, inside the command hub, Adam had made a silent modification 2 nights before. He had installed a pressure regulator bypass and set it on delay. The moment Michael pulled that switch, Canyon Ridge wouldn't be pumping water, they would be triggering a chain reaction. A reverse surge. Controlled failure. Complete exposure. All that remained was for Michael to grab that lever. Adam watched the man raise his hand. He listened to the fake applause, the scripted laughter, the empty corporate praise. And as Michael wrapped his hand around the lever with a smile of arrogance, Adam Cole breathed one silent vow: let the river judge you. And the world would soon hear its verdict. The morning sun rose over the valley like a slow awakening beast, casting red fire across the sky and illuminating the twisted skeletons of scorched land where the illegal dam once stood. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, a scent of renewal after destruction. But beneath the serene surface of the recovering landscape, a tension pulsed, quiet, electric, and waiting. The battle was no longer about a simple stream or stolen water. It had become something deeper. Something primal. A fight for land, for dignity, for the right to stand one's ground and not be trampled. Clint McAllister had prepared for this moment his entire life, he just never expected it to come in this way. He was not raised to go looking for war, but when war came looking for him, he had always known exactly what to do. Honor demanded measured patience. Justice demanded deliberate action. Revenge demanded timing. And now everything was finally in place. The night before had been quiet but busy. Clint had walked the perimeter of his property like a hunter stalking prey. Along the northern ridge, he reset trail cameras and repositioned sensor alarms. Along the river, he planted steel stakes and posted new legal notices. At the old cattle fence, he reinforced the chain gate and locked it with a court seal tag. And most importantly, beneath the battered wooden bridge that spanned the river, he installed a final hidden surprise. Everything he had done was lawful. Every move had purpose. Every step was documented. Because after tomorrow, there would be no more questions. His enemies would choke on the truth. Meanwhile, in the HOA headquarters across town, Melinda Crow was coming apart. Failure was a concept she did not understand, infamy, even less so. The news drones circling Crow Estates had turned her kingdom into a spectacle. Anonymous whistleblowers had begun forwarding board emails to reporters. And overnight, 3 of her board members abruptly resigned, citing ethical concerns. But Melinda wasn't beaten. Not yet. Like a venomous snake cornered on stone, she was coiling for a strike. She had called an emergency board meeting just after dawn. The remaining members gathered in her office, gaunt, exhausted, visibly shaken. Melinda wore a black business suit like armor, and her expression was carved in ice. She spoke of retaking control and protecting community assets. But what she really meant was eliminating Clint McAllister before he could destroy everything she built. And her final move? She would make sure he never dared fight again. But Melinda made one fatal mistake that morning. She underestimated the one law she could never break: cause and effect. Around mid-morning, Clint stood alone beside the riverbank as a convoy of unmarked trucks began crawling down the dirt road toward his property. They drove slowly, purposefully, like a force that believed itself unstoppable. 3 black SUVs in front. 2 contractor trucks behind with flatbeds. In the center, a pristine white government-style van with tinted windows. The HOA had brought outsiders. As the convoy reached the first gate, Clint didn't move. He simply waited and watched from the hill. He knew who was in those vehicles. Surveyors from the Crow Foundation. Contractors hired to seize and reroute the river. And most importantly, 2 deputies from a neighboring county who had been bribed to help enforce a civil land takeover. He also knew the move was illegal. And that was exactly why he let them come. They broke the first gate without warning. Clint triggered a remote switch and hidden cameras above recorded every second. The trucks pushed forward through dry sagebrush and rutted tracks. When they reached the bridge, Clint finally stepped forward. He walked out onto the center of the old wooden span as if summoned there by destiny. He wore his brown work coat, worn jeans, and beat-up boots. No weapon in sight. No anger on his face. Just stillness, unshakable and terrifying. The lead SUV rolled to a stop. Doors opened. Melinda Crow stepped out, wrapped in expensive arrogance. Beside her, Carter Grant, her private attorney, scanning for weakness like a dog searching for scraps. The bribed deputies joined them, hands resting on their belts in quiet threat. Clint remained silent. Melinda walked toward him with measured certainty. For a moment, it seemed she had regained control. But that illusion shattered the moment she stepped onto the bridge. Because this time, Clint spoke first. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout or threaten. He simply announced in a calm, final tone that they were trespassing, that they were violating court order, and that every step forward would only tighten the legal noose around their own necks. From the ridge, United States Marshals began to emerge. From the south pasture, a team of state environmental officers stepped forward. On the western road, a line of sheriff's cruisers rolled in. Melinda turned, but too late. She had walked into a ring of steel. Clint spoke again. Not to Melinda, but to the marshals. He handed them a folder of documents. Evidence of board fraud. Illegal land seizure. Obstruction of public water infrastructure. Donations disguised as bribes. And hidden offshore accounts. It was enough to put people away for life. Melinda's face drained of color. Carter began backing away. The deputies beside her froze, then stared down at their own boots, realizing they had just traded careers for cash. The men in the contractor trucks didn't move. They knew a losing battle when they saw one. But Clint wasn't done. When Melinda turned to escape, he triggered the trap. He had known she would try to run. He had known she would abandon her own people. Because a tyrant always flees when stripped of power. So Clint had set an insurance measure, a truth device. As Melinda fled toward the bridge entrance, a pressure wire gave under her heel. Cameras hidden under the planks began broadcasting live, directly to every news station within 500 miles. And the world saw Melinda Crow caught in real time with a briefcase full of falsified land contracts, forged signatures, and bribe ledgers. The marshals moved in. She fought, but fear is never a weapon of the righteous. She was dragged to the ground, screaming Clint's name like a curse. But Clint didn't look at her. He didn't need to. She was no longer his enemy. She had become her own downfall. And as the handcuffs clicked closed around her wrists, the river roared behind them, like thunder celebrating judgment. This war was over. Or so Clint thought. Because as he turned, he saw something that froze his blood. In the far distance, beyond the marshals, beyond the news crews, beyond the shattered remains of the Crow Empire, someone else was watching. Someone who hadn't moved. Someone who hadn't spoken. Someone who hadn't lost. A man stood alone on the hill, stone-faced, arms crossed. He wore a tailored black coat and polished boots. A stranger. But not unfamiliar. Clint had seen him before, once, in a courtroom in Utah, during a historic land rights case. A man feared by families, tribes, and corporations alike. A man who never showed his hand until it was too late. Harlan Crow. Melinda's father. And the real power behind Crow Estates. The storm had only begun. The river moved steady and silent in the early dawnlight, as if it already knew the outcome of what was coming. A thin silver mist hovered over the water, drifting low through the valley like a whisper from the earth itself. Nothing in the world seemed hurried except the men who were now closing in on Clint McAllister's land. Melinda Crow had fallen. Her empire collapsed. Her name now stained every newspaper from Arizona to Montana. But something darker had stepped from the shadows in her place. That presence now shaped the air with cold authority. Harlan Crow had arrived. Unlike his daughter, he did not rage. He did not threaten. He simply moved, quiet and deliberate, like a man who knew he could bend the world without raising his voice. He was not a governor, not a judge, not a sheriff. Yet somehow richer and more feared than all three combined. Harlan Crow controlled foundations, land trusts, oil leases, and private enforcement firms. He did not believe in justice. Only ownership. And now he had come to claim Clint's land, not out of business, but revenge. Clint sensed Harlan's approach long before the trucks arrived. The storm that had begun with Melinda had only been a warning. The real war was this, quiet and personal. A battle not of bullets or courtroom filings, but endurance. Two men born from old American blood, one forged by land, the other by greed, headed toward a collision that could not be undone. For 2 days after Melinda's arrest, Clint prepared in silence. He reinforced the legal barricades, not with guns, but with binding land protections. Crow Estates had been dissolved under federal investigation, but Clint discovered something worse: the corporation had been only a shell. The land grabs had always been financed by Harlan's private investment firm. Melinda had been only a proxy. Now Harlan was stepping in to finish what she started. But Clint had one last move to play, one final card buried deep in the legal archive of the county courthouse. Something older than any corporate deed. Something sacred to this valley, older than the Crow name itself. By the time Harlan Crow arrived at the McAllister Ranch, Clint had already filed his final motion at the courthouse. One signature. One map. One historical claim. Not to own the river, but to grant it protection. The McAllister River Protection Act was a keystone ordinance Clint had quietly drafted 10 years earlier and buried in county records, never submitted, never forgotten. It gave permanent, irrevocable protection to the river system that ran through McAllister Ranch and every downstream property. Once filed, no entity, corporate or private, could divert, dam, or own it. The court challenge would take years, but while in review, every activity by Harlan Crow would fall under federal environmental investigation. The land war would freeze. Crow money would burn trying to fight it. And the trap was already sprung. Harlan Crow's convoy arrived at dawn on the third day. No sheriff cars. No black SUVs with tinted windows. He came with a formation of silent men in gray suits, private security in polished boots, tactical holsters hidden under jackets. Businessmen without conscience. Harlan stepped out. No rage. No arrogance. Just cold calculation wrapped in a $6,000 overcoat. He didn't look at the marshal's stationed near the county road. He didn't look at the news crews still camped on the ridge. He walked straight toward Clint McAllister, who waited at the river with calm eyes. No words were exchanged. There was no handshake. They stood 10 feet apart in the frost of morning, two men who had already measured each other and found no fear. Harlan surveyed the land like a predator. He did not see beauty. He saw weakness. He saw opportunity. He saw profit drowning in clean water. Clint saw none of that. He saw legacy. He saw history. He saw the world as it was meant to be, untouched by men who thought they could buy everything. Harlan Crow finally spoke, but his voice was not heard by any recording device, for Clint had banned cameras from the riverbank. This wasn't a spectacle. It was a reckoning. And only men of consequence were allowed to witness it. He offered Clint a staggering sum, a sum big enough to erase Clint from history, to bury the truth behind a wall of money. Harlan vowed not just to buy Clint's land, but to destroy him completely if he refused. Lawsuits, investigations, blacklisted contracts. Banks would close their doors. Supply companies would ignore his name. His cattle would starve. His fences would rot. Life would close in like a noose. Because Harlan Crow didn't threaten with bullets. He threatened with starvation. And yet, Clint didn't move. He didn't blink. He simply reached into his coat and handed Harlan an envelope. Not a deal. Not a request. A declaration. Inside that envelope was a certified copy of the river protection filing, recorded that very morning. Not only did it override Harlan's land claim, it exposed decades of illegal water acquisitions by Crow Enterprises. And because Clint had filed it as county water commissioner, it triggered automatic review by the U.S. Department of the Interior. Investigators were already in motion before Harlan had even arrived. The empire builder didn't respond. His emotionless face cracked, but not with rage. With interest. He had lost this battle. But he admired the man who had won it. For the first time, Harlan Crow spoke Clint McAllister's name like he was worth remembering. And he promised they would meet again. For men who shape land and law, they always do. Harlan turned. His men followed. The engines roared. The mountain air trembled as the convoy disappeared into dust. And Clint McAllister stood alone once more beside the river. But he was not the same man who began this war. He did not win because he fought hardest. He won because he refused to surrender to fear, to greed, to tyranny. He had proven something few men ever get the chance to prove, that land does not belong to those who can buy it. It belongs to those who honor it. He did not own the river. He protected it. And in that quiet victory, written not in blood, but in truth, the land finally breathed again. For justice had found its home.